What's up and welcome. This is me, you, and Switch 2. I'm me, Tom Tate, and you are you. So let's talk about Switch 2. This is your source for the latest Nintendo Switch 2 news. We're going to keep things short and sweet. 5 to 10 minute episodes coming at you every Tuesday and Friday. Today is Friday, September 5th. And honestly, we had a wild week for Nintendo news. There is a lot today, so let's just get into it. The big one up front, long-anticipated game, Hollow Knight Silksong, finally released yesterday. It was $20. This game was so in demand, it crashed most of the major platforms. So the Nintendo eShop was throwing error codes, Steam had trouble, Xbox had trouble, Sony had trouble. People were so hungry to dive into this game and pick it up on launch in the exact launch window that was available. So we definitely noticed that we had some challenges. Review codes didn't go out before the release, so we're getting first impressions from the major outlets alongside everyday players, just like you and I. So because of that, I'm going to hold off on reviews, sharing reviews for right now. I'm going to save it for Tuesday. So let me kind of digest how the reactions have been over the weekend, and then on Tuesday's episode, I'll talk about how we think this game is performing. But Silksong wasn't the only game to release this week. We also got Star Wars Outlaws, Cronos: The New Dawn, and Daemon X Machina Titanic Scion. Let's take a look at how these are doing because review codes did go out for most of these. There was a lot of talk early on that Star Wars wasn't going to perform well based on some video footage of gameplay. PJ O'Reilly over at Nintendo Life reviewed this game and gave it an 8 out of 10, which was also the same score that he gave the Xbox version. So a couple of his joys: looks, sounds, and plays great on Switch 2. A full-fat AAA Star Wars gaming experience that runs great in portable. Tight campaign doesn't overstay its welcome. Great use of the dingier and danker locations from the universe, and stealth gameplay and mission choices are surprisingly good. Some of the cons: the loss of 60 frames per second will be a no-go for some players. The odd bit of hitching here and there when transitioning to a new area. Character models can look a little rough at times. And I noticed that personally on the preview. He closed out his review saying, with solid performance and good looks in both docked and handheld, and motion controls and cross saves thrown in for good measure, this is an easy recommendation for Switch 2 fans of Star Wars. So me personally, this game does look like a lot of fun, and I heard good things about the Xbox and PlayStation version. I heard it cleaned up a little bit, fixed some of the rough edges. I'm waiting for a price drop on this one. I've seen it go on sale on other platforms, and I've got plenty to play right now, but I'm glad to hear that the performance is a non-issue because that's been the talk for the past couple of weeks, especially with Elden Ring and a few other games that we think maybe Borderlands might be struggling on Switch 2. So good to hear that performance is fine. Cronos: The New Dawn. This is a horror game from Bloober Team. They did last year's Silent Hill remake, which I've heard a lot of good things about as well. IGN gave Cronos a 7 out of 10. They reviewed the PS5 version. And then Claire Lewis at Polygon wrote an article, and the headline for this one is Cronos: The New Dawn is contemporary horror at its very best. Bloober Team's mind-bending new title is a hodgepodge of everything we love about survival horror. I'm not sure what version they played, but provided the games are relatively the same, good news for horror fans. There's actually a video on Go Nintendo. I'll put a link in the show notes that compares the graphics and performance of the PS5 version and the Switch 2 version. It's 20 minutes long, very detailed. Again, I'll drop the link. If this is your genre, if you like those tense, dark, creepy, ambient games like, Dead Space almost, it's pretty great that we have this as an option on Switch 2. Not for me, this isn't my genre, but really good for the platform. I'm glad that this came to Switch 2. And then finally, Daemon X Machina. This is not an instant hit based on what I've read. It's not terrible either. This, of course, is a sequel to a game that did release on Switch. Nintendo Life reviewed it and gave it a 6 out of 10, citing performance issues, 30 frames per second, exacerbating some controller lag issues, and they also mentioned it has an awful English dub. So not the AAA title that some might have been hoping for. I will have a link in the show notes for that review as well, if you want to check that out, if this game was on your radar. We got a few unexpected releases this week too. A game called Bad Cheese arrived on Switch 1 and Switch 2. This game doesn't look great in my opinion. According to Go Nintendo, this is a first-person horror game with an art style inspired by Steamboat Willie and other animations from that era. Personally, it looks crude. In my opinion, this is probably tied to Steamboat Willie entering the public domain. We saw this with Winnie the Pooh, and they had that Winnie the Pooh slasher film that came out. So we're going to see these types of things where they just jump on the opportunity to play off of the IP that is now in public domain. Forsaken 64. This is a 1998 N64 first-person shooter. It arrived on the Nintendo Classics Mature app. So they have a separate app for mature games. I don't know if that's in the US or if that's only in other markets. I'll have to double check to see if this is in my normal N64 app. This game has some iconic box art from, what I remember back in the day. It's a woman's face with a heart tattoo on her cheek, and it says Forsaken. I've never played this one, but of course I remember the box. Back in July, you might recall, if you've been listening to this podcast, we covered a fan who de-blurred the background of some promo images that revealed Forsaken's box art, along with other games' box art as well, too. So we had Glover, Rayman 2, Donkey Kong 64, the original Smash Brothers. So the fact that we got Forsaken, which I think is a bit of an obscure choice, and it was part of that little de-blurring project, we might see Glover, Rayman 2, and Donkey Kong and Smash Brothers right around the corner. So we'll see as the months progress, if we continue to get more N64 games. I just ordered the 8-bit do N64 controller, which is going to be compatible with the analog 3D console and also with Switch and Switch 2. So I'm excited to get that in. I'll let you guys know how that turns out because that might be a great controller to play some of these N64 games. We will see if those other titles come to light as well. Okay, speed round. Here's everything else I picked up on this week. Again, heavy news week. The GBA, Nintendo Switch Online app, received a bit of an update, 1080p support, button remapping, and there's an Easter egg now where you can get the original GBA boot logo by holding the left analog stick when starting up the app. So a little fun Easter egg there. Resident Evil Requiem is rumored to be coming to Switch 2 along with a PS4 release. So it looks like Capcom is trying to get this into the hands of as many gamers as they can. It's uncertain if this is true. It's just a rumor. But if so, it's also uncertain if it'll have gameplay concessions, right? So will it be the exact same game with just some graphic fidelity changes, or will it be a different game, different engine altogether? Unsure. We'll keep following that one. This is definitely poised to be a big 2026 release. It would be awesome if this comes to Switch. 007 First Light now has a release date, March 27th, 2026. This is courtesy of a 35-minute Sony PlayStation State of Play broadcast that happened earlier this week. I didn't watch the full thing, but I'm hoping to check it out. What I read is that this game looks like it's a nice mix between Uncharted and Hitman. So if you're a fan of those games, this might be a fantastic entry on Switch 2. And finally, Square Enix made the rounds with some hands-on previews and interviews for Final Fantasy Tactics, The Ivalice Chronicles, and Octopath Traveler 0. Octopath 0 has been confirmed as kind of this reimagining, remake, inspiration of their mobile game. And this raised some red flags. From Polygon, though, from an article that they posted, I'll put a link in the show notes. Polygon wrote, "For anyone worried that Octopath Traveler 0 would be infected by Champions of the Continent's mobile mechanics, Square Enix reassured Kotaku that it is a new core entry in the series without gacha or other common mobile game mechanics. So if you're worried, hopefully that eases some of your concerns. Final Fantasy Tactics. I'm all in on this one. I don't have too much else to say. The previews look awesome. September 30th. I'll link to some of the previews in the notes if you want to check them out. Overall, some pretty positive stuff, especially around the performance and the depth. Tried to play this one, I think on PSP, and it was just load times, laggy, not a fun experience. So I never actually finished Final Fantasy Tactics, even though I gave it a bunch of false starts on PS1 and PSP. and emulation and all the other things. Again, a lot of news this week, more so than usual. Thank you so much for hanging on. I know we went past the 10-minute mark, but that's it. We're done. It's Friday. It's the weekend. I hope that means you can relax, carve out some time to play, whether it's Nintendo Switch or your favorite games, favorite console. Did you pick up any of the new games? You can let me know. I'm Switch2Pod on Blue Sky. Switch2Pod, that's switch with the number 2 pod.com for all the things. Reviews are much appreciated. Recommending the show to a friend or a community is even more appreciated. That's actually the best. The numbers keep growing. So thank you out there for listening, for continuing to listen. Thank you as always for your time and your attention. Enjoy life. Much love. Now go play some games.